everyone, to another episode of HR and Payroll 2.0. I'm Pete Tiliakis, and as always, I'm joined by the legendary Julie Fernandez. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks so much, Pete. I can't wait for you to introduce our guest today.
Yes. I'm super excited to welcome Jim Kohl to the show. Jim is the head of payroll for Check. If you're not familiar with Check, Check is an API-driven embedded payroll solution, very tech-forward, very future of payroll. And we're here to have him talk about the art and science of modern payroll. So welcome, Jim.
Hey, thanks for having me, Pete. Really happy to be here. And thanks, Julie. I appreciate that. I'm also excited to speak with you.
Yeah, likewise.
Same here. Let's dig in. Well, actually, I think we have a little bit of news first, right, Pete?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jim, maybe just before we go there, Jim, one of the things I mean, the way we got together was on social media, right? I think we've kind of met over LinkedIn and Twitter, and we realized we both have a lot of the same interests, and we live here in Atlanta. But maybe just tell me a little bit about your role and what Check actually does and is, and how you fit into that. It would be great. And then we can kind of jump in for context real quick.
Yeah, of course. So Check is an API for embedded payroll. So what we do essentially is we are not out there selling payroll, but we create payroll businesses. So we allow different vertical SaaS platforms or workforce management solutions, staffing, employer of record, to add payroll to their product naturally.
Yeah.
So that they can offer payroll as a solution, for their industry.
Yeah, very cool.
It's awesome and exciting to be, the first of its kind. We have some really great companies that have already started building, running, and selling payroll on top of us. House Call Pro, 7 Shifts, Homebase, Eddy, Miter. All these companies that are out there selling payroll directly to their industry, which has been incredibly exciting. As far as I go, I actually was the third employee at Check. So I started.
Very good.
Yeah,
Nice.
really in the early days. And it's funny, as soon as the idea of embedded payroll was pitched to me by our CEO, Andrew, I was like, I have no idea what that means. I couldn't picture it 4 years ago.
Yeah.
But now I can picture it. I've seen it be successful, and it's incredibly exciting. So what I brought to Check was just 15 years of payroll industry experience prior to that. My career started at Paychex, where I was a support specialist working on their core platform. I moved into their core advanced platform and then their major markets platform. So I got to play with all the tools in the chest over at Paychex. Just learned a tremendous amount there, and I was able to bring all of that knowledge to Check, thinking through what it would be like to set up a business and support payroll. That's really what my role is now, is providing support and providing education to our partners to enable them to become these successful payroll businesses.
Yeah, that is very unique. That's a very unique payroll role, right? Like, I mean, you're out there enabling people whose focus and core strength is not payroll, and you're making it where you can bring payroll and payroll technology and capability to their solutions. So and their environments. I think it's so cool, and I love your perspectives. I'm excited to get in here and contrast them as we talk about payroll a little bit later on. And again, the art and science of it, right? I want to get into that. And the art part of it, I want to talk a little bit about something that, go ahead, Julie.
We really need to sneak preview,
Yes.
because the way that you introduced Jim to me is more in the art, the art and kind of some hobby that Jim has that I can't wait to talk about. So mention that for sure before we dive into news.
Yeah. So Jim, maybe tell us a little bit about, so one of the things that Jim and I connected over is his love of art. You're an artist or a graphic artist, I think, Jim, and you've created some really cool, that we both have taken a look at and checked out and played around with. And I can't wait to use some. I hope you'll give me the rights, in some of my writing, is comics, right? You've made some comics that I think are really, really fitting for the times, really funny, almost a kind of a dry humor in a way, dry office humor, I guess. But tell us a little bit about that, because I love this part of it. I want to talk about it as we get going.
Yeah, of course, Pete. So I think probably one of the secrets of payroll, maybe it's not so secret, I don't know, is that nobody grows up as a child and dreams of getting into the payroll world.
Yeah.
You're not there as a child with crayons, writing out fake checks to your friends. So I think, like most payroll people, I love art. I'm an artist, so I had a talent outside of payroll that I always wanted to do. I always
Yeah.
imagined I'd grow up and be a cartoonist or an artist of some sort.
And here you are in payroll.
Yeah, and here
Yeah.
I am in payroll.
Yeah.
But payroll was a very safe way to get into the world, right? Everybody needs it. As soon as I started doing it, I fell in love with it. But art has something that's always stayed with me, since I was old enough to hold a crayon, and I started drawing a daily comic strip when I was in college. I did that for a few years.
Very cool.
Yeah, and that actually led me to becoming the label artist for a brewery.
Oh, yep, that's right. You told me that. I remember that. You showed me
Yeah,
those. Yes.
yeah. So
Very cool.
I am the sole artist for a brewery based in New Jersey, called Bolero Snort. I draw all of their labels,
That is so cool.
but uh, I wasn't meeting that need. And I really wanted to connect my day job with my passion. And so I spun up this comic strip called Humanoid Resources,
Yeah.
which is all about just aliens and robots in this distant future working at some, mega global corporation and dealing with all of the things that I think recruiters, HR folks, and payroll people deal with nowadays. And to your point, Pete, I think the humor comes off pretty dry, but I enjoy it.
I
And
love it.
yes, of course, you'll be able to share as many as you'd like.
I love it.
We
Awesome.
might
Awesome.
need to have we might need to ask for some of our own custom graphics, Pete, for HR and Payroll 2.0.
Yeah, right. We need an HR and Payroll 2.0. We need some characters, maybe some characters and maybe some comic strips. So we'll see. But well, that's good. That's so awesome, Jim. I want to dig into this more. I definitely want to get into your mind about payroll. But let's talk about marketplace news. We got some big news this week. I'm sure you guys saw it. I think you know what I'm talking about. UKG and Amitis have decided to get married. I'm going to pause there. Julie, what do you think about that right out of the gate? And then I'm going to kind of give you my bits on what I think about this. Yeah.
Definitely fanfare. You're going to see a lot of folks talking about this, I think, and most of all UKG, and it's because of the combination, right, of themselves and their capabilities, tied with Kronos and global payroll, tied now with a global payroll offering. There's a part of me though that for those who have been in this market says, okay, but they were partners already with Amitis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Active Payroll and a number of others, right, in the market. Adam, which got snapped up by Ceridian, and historically, but historically, so it's like, okay, well, what do I gain by marrying one, right? If I've been dating several and I had all kinds of options, some of my clients might want the options, but when you think about the marriage, you can't help but think historically about what has happened to UKG in this space, where their primary dance partner in the past, which was Celergo, got snapped up by ADP, and it's like, now what? Now what do I do?
Yes.
And similar things have happened on the NetSuite side. I mean, it's a market where folks are dancing, and if you don't make a commitment, you can lose a dance partner, and that's what I thought about first when I saw this.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, so let me be honest with you. I know both of these organizations really well. I've worked with them both. I've done a little bit of work both on research, maybe even some advisory here and there, and content for some. Amitis, I've done some work with in terms of content when CMO Tara O'Donohue was there. And big fan of both of these solutions. I think what you're seeing is, and we've seen it, right? We talked about Alight and Workday getting a little bit closer together. I think some of that was, that was driven. Well, let me back up. All of these things are being driven by the fact that organizations recognize that they are fundamentally finding themselves multinational employers, whether they wanted to be or not, whether that was for global expansion, merger and acquisition, or fundamentally because they're trying to compete for talent or diversity and skills. And they've had to go outside of the home market, which they should be. Everybody should be recruiting and looking for talent. You cannot just set, it's not, there's not enough talent, right? You're not, back in the day when you could say, well, we can just get more people, right? We could just fill these roles, no problem. We throw posting up and within 50 miles or 100 miles of our metro area, we're going to get what we need. That's not the case anymore. And so I think that you're finding that organizations are waking up and going, oh, wait a minute, we've got a long tail global payroll need and we don't know what we're doing. And so I think that what you're, and oh, by the way, the bigger you get, right? We as we all know, that gets gnarlier and gnarlier and more complicated. And you commonly find yourself with all this cobbled together stuff. And then one day you wake up and it's not really fitting your needs. It's not agile. It's not scalable. And oh, by the way, it's also not integrated well and all of that sort of thing. So my data is not available. So I think what's happening is you're seeing the HCM tech firms get more and more of a push to say, hey, help us here. And you've got some that have been much more aggressive about going after the global footprint, Ceridian, or maybe even SAP was way ahead of everyone, I would argue, 40 plus calc engines. And then you've got others who have kind of been sort of staying out of the game, if you will. I would argue Workday has been very passive to addressing global payroll. I think UKG has taken much more of a cautious approach, maybe, and I think they are a conservative organization by design, and they always are and have been. But I think they saw an opportunity. Look, Immedis was begging to be bought. I don't think that was any secret, right? We all know that. It's been for sale. I don't think that it was. It's done. They've done very well. They have a fantastic solution. It's highly automated. It's incredibly forward-looking. The thing that I think makes sense here for UKG is the fact that they did buy a partner that they are deeply integrated with, and I think what you'll see is that Immedis technology getting blended closer and closer together as a control point, a control center, dashboard, whatever, in the UKG environment. It's already integrated. It's already sharing data. They already have shared clients. Makes total sense in that way. And by the way, UKG has an incredible capability when it comes to workforce management, right? We all know they're the primary partner for folks like ADP for advanced scheduling. They were for SuccessFactors until they needed to change when they felt there was too much of a competition when Kronos got together with Ultimate. So I think what happened here was this was a opportunistic thing. It was the right time, right place. And what I think is interesting, though, is Immedis was, if I'm not mistaken, the go-to for Dayforce in Europe. So I think this is going to leave a gap for some, or not a gap, but a threat maybe for some of these firms that were really leaning into Immedis. And Immedis had some fantastic breadth of relationships when it came to integrations around the market. They were in everyone's marketplace and doing very well that way. And I think that this, obviously accelerates UKG's ability to now go out and have a globally capable workforce management solution and payroll solution. But oh, by the way, it could also offer HCM, which I would imagine a number of firms will come to their solution by way of the HCM, which makes sense. But I think the big opportunity, the biggest TAM here to me is going to be in the WFM and global payroll offering that they can now go to market in a single organization and really make some real impact. So especially those big, gnarly, manufacturers, retailers, whatever. The thing I don't like about this, I'll be honest with you, Julie, is there's no calc engines coming from Immedis, not a single one. Yeah. All of them are licensed or white labeled or partners. And so that, to me, I'm wondering, I want to get more information from UKG on this and why that made sense, because I think that might have been where they might have missed here. But otherwise, I'm excited. Yeah. I think it's a great solution.
Me too. I agree. These are a couple of great organizations, but, you can't underscore enough the fact that them coming together in this marriage is an opportunity. And, there have been others that have found their mates, right? Or married a couple of people even in this space. And there's a lot of secret sauce that has to go into bringing these together closely and tightly. And in fact, UKG has already seen, some of the challenges of that when they brought the Ultimate group together with Kronos to form UKG, and figuring out then how to really make that secret sauce happen as you bring a couple of large product sets together. So so wishing them luck and success, of course, and I can't wait to follow this and see how it evolves.
Yeah, and I'm hoping, I am going to write an article on this very soon, so look for that. But I also did a post on LinkedIn with some thoughts here, kind of similar. So if you're interested in that, check that out also.
I saw that. You're so fast on that. Okay, I think you had another one also in the same space though, right?
Yeah, similar. Velocity Global, this was a few weeks ago, has launched some new product offering, right? And very, very similar to what you're seeing, I think, the EOR market go towards, and that is more automation, more of an intuitive kind of DIY guided onboarding process for both, figuring out where, what it's going to cost and model hiring in another country, quoting that out, getting you to the agreements, and fundamentally getting the contract signed and onboarding the workers much faster, right? So Velocity is a big global EOR, an independent contractor provider, obviously continues to advance their technology. And so I think what you're seeing here is just more of that automated DIY, streamlined, rapid. That's one of the key things when you think about global EOR is speed and agility, right? It's speed to market, the ability to execute on something, whether that be talent, whether that be an opportunity to move into a new location. And that's what this is all about. So I think you're seeing more and more and more of that streamlined automation. And of course, I think you're seeing more integration as well. I'm starting to see firms getting connected to the HCMs, right? So you're seeing like globalization partners and some others. I would imagine Velocity, I know, has a few as well that are getting into marketplaces and going into the HCM integrations route as well. But also here in this solution, they're going to be bringing in partnership with Lever, talent acquisition capability, the ability to help integrate recruiting for the purpose of finding, engaging, and hiring talent globally. That'll include, 360-degree views of employee lifecycle data, from recruitment all the way through to HR compliance. So very much what I think you're going to see the EOR model go to, and that is a global platform for, insightful, rapid, automated, global talent employment. Excuse me. So very indicative of what I think you're going to see more of here in global EOR. And just going back to this consolidation thing, don't think that this is over. Everyone's got their eye on global payroll right now in the HCM space where it matters. And so, for sure, we're going to see more.
I know I often have conversations in the matchmaking department. I'm sure you do as well, where, folks that we work with and the different provider spaces are dating around and wondering.
Yeah. Yeah. Interestingly, I get whether people know this or not, I get a lot of executives that come to me with rumors. And so I have heard some of the craziest rumors, I have to be honest with you. But this one with Immedis and UKG, I could have predicted probably a few months ago. I think many people probably could have. I'm not like a genius or anything. I'm just saying, just listening to what I was hearing, seeing, and knowing, I pretty much called this one several months ago.
We should have a rumors episode. But since Jim is here, I can't wait to see if you start on the art side or the science side.
Yes. Let's go talk payroll now. Yes, Jim. So you talked about being in payroll, right? Obviously for some time now. How long have you been in it, and what actually got you into payroll? I think you said earlier it was convenient, right?
I don't know. It was entirely convenient. I think it was just finding a job that would give me benefits. So I started there, but I have been in the payroll industry for 17 years. I absolutely love it. The reason I stay in it is because I love working in a field that has connectivity to all people.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have thought it going into the industry. It seemed very, very straightforward and almost administrative in some aspects in the early days. But that the first time that you're able to do something behind the scenes to make sure that somebody is paid timely, even if they were dropped off the payroll or missed in some way, like having that win was something that I was like, I want to be in this industry so I can always make sure people are paid timely and accurately. And I get very motivated by finding passion in payroll, making people passionate about payroll. I do spend a lot of time, writing. I do different presentations to train on payroll because I want people to share in my passion, because I do believe it really it connects all of us. It's such an exciting thing that I think a lot of people tend to not think about.
Jim, that's like so fun because, we talk about attracting people to the profession and, and it has a reputation as a lot of things, many of them kind of nerdy and things. They would be like, I don't know if this is a space where I could feel that, that engagement and feel that value that I'm bringing to people every day. So thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, and thank you for staying in payroll, Jim. We need more. We need more people like you. It's a profession that I think is incredibly misunderstood, and it's incredibly undervalued. And I know we talk a lot about all the ways in which technology is going to transform this role, and you've got some people that are saying, well, it's going to be completely gone because of technology, and then you've got myself, I don't agree with that. I think that's being said by people who probably have never actually worked in a corporate payroll environment supporting an organization, and all of the work that goes in be outside of processing, right? That the teams have to do in negotiating and working and supporting their business. And the thing that I wish more. One of the things that you said, Jim, is about how it touches people, right? But one of the things I try to encourage, I feel sorry for these executive leaders. Actually, let me say it a different way. I feel sorry for these executive leaders, and I think you've probably seen this. And Julia, I bet you've seen this. How often have you seen? And maybe it's from my corporate payroll and HR days. Is there's often these things you'll be working on, right? You'll be in a meeting. I would be in meetings with different segments of the HR organization, finance organization, whatever the business, and there was always a lot of HR folks who would be like, that's payroll. Like almost like they had to put their fingers in their ears when you started to talk. Like, I don't know any of that. I don't touch that. That's payroll. Payroll knows that. You go to payroll, right? It's like they're scared of it. You know what I mean? And they don't take any time to learn it. They don't take any time to understand it. And then when something goes wrong, of course, they're, oh my goodness, help me. And I always tell people, like, you're going about this the wrong way. Like, payroll is actually the path to learning all of HR. And that's what I think the practitioner doesn't get enough credit for being such a more well-rounded, knowledgeable about HR and the practice of the business than people give credit to payroll for. And then the hands-off nature of, oh, it's payroll, I don't know that, I don't touch that, I think is really making them miss out on opportunities to learn and understand and respect what goes on in payroll and what it can do. So do you see that, Jim, or do you think have you experienced that yourself?
Yeah, I think I think HR probably, maybe 20, 25 years ago must have had a really good publicist and was like, you know what, in order to be cool, you're going to have to decouple from HR. So you're going to have to decouple from payroll. So pretend you're not friends with them anymore. And then HR, I think, really went on to become this cool area to work, and payroll sort of stayed, behind a grade, and was sort of like the nerdy ex-friend of HR. But to your point, Pete, like I do see them very close together, and I think the best HR people truly do understand payroll. But then it goes both ways, right? I think the best
Yes.
payroll people really do understand those aspects of HR. So I think they always should be. I think they should always be complementary of each other and connected.
Best
Yeah.
friends, right? I think that's how
Yeah, best friends.
that's what you've done with them artistically. It's just made them best buds, BFFs.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think that, we talked about art and science, right, of payroll. And I think I really love that Payorg this year branded the Payroll Congress art and science, because I think that a lot of people think it's just technology. It's just math. That's it. You're just down there cutting checks. No big deal. What's the big, what's taking you so long? Why is it so hard? But it's so much more art, right? There's so much you have to do I know in bigger companies, right? Down market, little companies, it's less complicated. Sure, you can automate the life out of it. But as you grow and mature, and as you start doing mergers and acquisitions, as you start doing org designs, and as you start doing strategic things at scale in the organization, payroll becomes incredibly critical to that. And there's a lot of work, soft skill work, that goes into that happening. And that is not going to be replaced by a piece of technology. I'm sorry. It's not. There's too much. And as long as HR is so hands off, out of sight, out of mind, it's not my job, I think it's going to perpetuate that. And I think the retained teams of the world that are left, right, when the roles that are, look, all the data entry and all the ticking and tying, that stuff is gone, thankfully. And that will continue to go away and degrade. And I think you're going to get to where we're going to be certainly straight through automation processing. But there is going to still be a massive need for the soft skills, the rich and I would say differentiated soft skills that the payroll managers and leaders of the world have, that can bring a lot of strategic capabilities to the organization if they're able to shift to those new skills, right? Managing vendors, managing bots and technology, and coaching and teaching or guiding your organization through their efforts. I think all of that is going to be super, super critical. And I think that's the art that payroll is going to need to bring to the table in the future. And I think that's where they're really going to get a chance to fundamentally shine in their roles. So, but what do you think? I mean, Jim, as far as technology goes, like what's your point of view on the art and science of, you're in a very high tech environment, very high tech solution, but what's the balance, do you think, of the art to this, if you will, air quotes, that the payroll practitioner uniquely brings to this from your point of view?
Yeah. So I think any good artist, when they're finished with their work, it almost seems effortless, right? Like somebody will
Yeah.
look at that and they're like, I can do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then if
They don't see the magic.
right, they don't see the magic. And I think a lot of payroll specialists have that ability.
Yeah.
They end up doing these amazing things to get payroll out, get payroll done timely, come up with creative solutions in the 23rd hour to make sure that everything goes through smoothly. And I think that those folks are just going to be enhanced by new technologies, new ways of doing things. But I think they're also going to be the ones that keep those technologies in check, right? When things do go wrong, they're the ones that solve. Or when technologies are working well, they're the ones that are empowered by them. I always think there will be a role for payroll people in the future. I think there's so many different areas where payroll will be impactful. Pete, I know you spoke with Nick, I think, a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Nick did a study last year about how many different career paths there are in payroll, and I think somewhere in the 20s. I don't think that that's going away anytime soon, right? I think there's just so much opportunity in payroll for folks that choose to focus there.
I'd love to jump off of that just a little bit, because I think, all of the things that are credited with developing advanced skills, in your HR career, in any of the functional areas, are available and in tremendous need for payroll practitioners. So, if you think of, as folks move to the cloud, needing to harmonize, you know, payroll processes, and that's a skill set. If you stop thinking about payroll as a job role or job description and start thinking about skill sets, the opportunity to do harmonization, the opportunity to deal with taking a domestic model global, the opportunity to deal with automation, and figure out how robotics process automation or chatbots or different AI tools can impact and create efficiencies, and also operating model work, right? So as technologies help us drive to more automation, and things are changing and we're moving in or out of shared services, figuring out what the operating model looks like in payroll. Those are as needed, in fact, more needed, from folks who understand the details of the function. And so your opportunity to expand your career and your skill set, your personal skill set, like you're in a niche area and you got a corner on the market to develop any of these skills that you would want to develop.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think payroll can take you in so many, I just gave a speech on this at the Payroll Congress, how payroll can take you to different levels. And I'll be honest with you, in that speech, I talk about how for probably the first 2/3 of my career, I tried very hard to distance myself from it because I thought I was treated, like many of us, as less than. I felt in a lot of ways. And I just perceived that if I continued to work in payroll, that it wasn't going to take me to where I wanted to be, the strategic sort of leader that I thought I needed to be in an HR environment. And I kept trying to kind of push away. And what I learned is once I leaned into it, the skills that I had from it and had developed from it, which actually were very foundationally set by the military, which are highly adaptive and translated it phenomenally well to the payroll world that I grew up in. It's very different than your world, Jim. but the lack of respect and the lack of investment and that's payroll, it's whatever. It just really fueled me, I think, to learn and prove people wrong. And I think that when I leaned in, and I'd love that, this is what I'm telling practitioners now, and I'm actually working on an article about this, is you hold phenomenal skills. If you go look at the new World Economic Forum's jobs report, right? If you look at the skills that employers most are looking to develop in their organizations over the next 5 years, they are all around adaptability, emotional intelligence, the ability to negotiate, the ability to be creative, leaders, all of that stuff, right? Does that not describe a payroll manager to the T? I mean, all day,
Spot
right?
on.
So yeah, so like I'm like you're ready. Like all you need is the opportunity to lift this weight off of your back that's pinned you to the ground for so long, because so many of them have been neglected with no support, no investment, no transformation, and just limping along. And to your point, pulling the rabbit out of the hat every week, and everyone's going, well, what's so hard about this? Well, we make it look easy. It's not that it is easy. And so you're absolutely right. I think there's this art to it, but I think also there's an opportunity for organizations to correct this now and start to look at their payroll organizations and say, let's give them the ability to let them really bring out those skills and shine. And what value can we get from it? And payroll practitioners, I think, need to lean into this technology, not run from it, embrace it, figure out how it can augment you to go off and be the best part of the bring out the best skills in you that you have, that you demonstrate every day, but it's demonstrated in a reactive way because your organizations may not be supporting you. And so I'm only hoping that we get people to understand that technology is your path to something better. And I'm excited about it, to be honest with you. I really am. Golden age of payroll, as I'm calling it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
It's the golden age of payroll. I couldn't agree more.
So let me ask you this, Jim, like how's payroll changed? Like just in 10 years, right? You're, no disrespect. You're a young payroll manager compared to what I am. Right. But what's changed in 10 years? I would argue it's a lot, but what in your world has changed that you think you've seen?
I think everything's changed. I mean, I feel really lucky that I was able to start my career when I think that, systems were just starting to mature. When I first was running payroll back in my Paychex days, I mean, it was a DOS-based system.
Yeah.
I had to type in a code to pull up regular hours and then
Oh,
key those in, and then
mainframes.
mainframes, and then tab through to get to the next employee.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't until like 4 years into my career when we actually got, a Windows system, where you could click around and, you could move through things much more eloquently, and you get your control totals and all the exciting things. But when I think about what's changed the most, I mean, number one is just the availability of employers to run their own payroll. I think it was incredibly manual for folks to either print out timesheets and fill them out manually, or capture those hours on an Excel sheet and then either send that into their payroll provider or email it or even fax it in some cases. So that's completely changed where, now people can literally text their payroll provider and the payroll is created and paid out. So I think that payroll processors, right, the admins at companies have much easier ways to run payroll with a lot of systems. Obviously, cloud-based continuous calculations. I think you see less errors as a result in that area. The one thing that hasn't changed, and I'm going to generalize here, but the one thing that kind of hasn't changed is the fact that every state website still looks like it was built at the dawn of the internet.
It does,
And
right?
it's like, how can there not be any budget to
Oh,
make it easier to collect taxes?
I know.
You think it would be like top of the list to make that as efficient as possible,
Yeah.
and it's just not.
Yeah.
But those are
Sorry, go ahead.
no, I was going to say I think that those are some of the highlights of what I've seen get better, what I haven't seen get better, and then of course the employee experience, right? You mentioned it at the top of the call, but onboarding is just so much quicker
Yeah.
for employees. I mean, they're connecting their bank account immediately. I know you're super passionate about this, Pete, but this sort of like one connectivity of a person's like finances, like I think we're moving in that direction in a really rapid way, and people logging into their bank account immediately having that set up with their employer or employers, I think in a lot of cases, but onboarding their W-4, whatever state withholding form they're filling out. I just think all of that is so much quicker than it used to be.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think about the whole, just the idea of, and I totally agree with you. I think that it's so refreshing to see the empowerment employees are getting, just the technology and the refreshing help that the payroll practitioners are getting. And sadly, there's a lot of folks that are still sending things across in Excels and using Excel. But and you're right, the level of digitalization still is lacking in some of our jurisdictions, and we've got countries out there that are way ahead of others on working with them electronically, and I think that'll get better, right? And hopefully that'll improve everything for everyone. But what do you think about just the reporting structure of payroll now in the new world? Like, there's a lot of debate around. There's always been the chicken or egg sort of conundrum for payroll. Does it report to HR? Does it report to finance? I'll tell you, I lean finance. I always was traditionalist that way. I feel money should be managed, report into finance. But from a care and feeding perspective, I think you kind of have to have HR matrix managing that experience. But what do you think about just the concept of this idea that people are floating that maybe payroll needs to be its standalone department or its own? And Julie, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. Like, what do you guys think about this concept? I'm kind of on the fence about it, to be honest with you. What do you think?
I was going to let Jim go first, but
sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
No, I was just going to say I love the idea of payroll being its own department. I do think this should be called out, right? It's always going to depend on the size of the business, whether or not you can you're large enough to have a separate HR department, separate payroll department. But in a larger business, I do think payroll would 100% be its own department and be right up there, next to the HR department and the finance department. Obviously, based on size, if they start to roll into each other because there's not as many heads to go around, I think that's fine. But I do think in a perfect world, payroll would get its own due.
Yeah, I think it could work. I mean, just in the right organization. Yeah, Julie, what do you see? What do you see companies doing nowadays?
Yeah, so as you know, I work with companies of all sizes, but oftentimes we start on the larger end of the spectrum. And on the larger end of the spectrum, I would say, it always has its own department entity, maybe more often aligned with the HR side than the finance side of the house, unless you start talking about a European headquartered or outside of the U.S. We might see more often on one side versus the other. But at that point in time, you're usually large enough, and I think in the HR versus finance story, we also have to acknowledge that in some organizations, it's shared services or global business services, which is a separate entity to either of those.
Yes.
And so I definitely see that happening. I also see payroll as, so mergers and acquisitions, you can end up working with somebody quite small or somebody growing quite fast. It is one of the first areas to get consolidated or centralized, so it's kind of the embryo for thinking about shared services if you're not of scale and you start to become of scale. And so that, that's also exciting when you think about, the opportunity to be at the beginnings or the birth of somebody that is, something that is starting to grow into its own, centralized element. And so I think we'll find practitioners that get a crack at working with that sort of a challenge. And the last thing I was going to say here is, I really wanted to expand my own creative license and say, Jim, you might need a new character in your art, and you might need a Finbot somewhere or whatever you call them. And maybe if we could do something funny with a GI, like an ex-Army payroll clerk bot. That I just think that's hilarious, and that's got Pete's name written all over it.
Well, let me tell you my opinion on this. So I'm a traditionalist. I love the reporting to finance, but I actually think that there is a place for payroll to almost be this sort of independent matrixed organization. And what I mean by that is I actually, in my experience working in corporate type HR in the bigger companies I worked with, is that I often spent a lot more of my time with the business than I did with HR or finance, even though both of them were massive stakeholders to what I was doing. And we were in constant contact, constantly working together at the highest levels, strategically and otherwise, tactically. I think that there was a lot of benefit to that because of being sort of, and for us, we were a shared service center. We were, at least in one of my roles, and a way, and sort of, reporting into finance from a reporting perspective, but very heavily dotted line, if you will, into HR as well. But I think that there is so much work that needs to go on with the business in many types of companies, and it's different for everyone, that you want to work very closely with them, right? Especially now that you have the frontline manager much more involved in HR. A lot of these initiatives that you might be supporting or working on change management or working through projects and such are impacting to the business as well. So I think there is a case for maybe an independent sort of hybrid department, but I think it all really depends on the size, the complexity, and what you're talking about in your company. So yeah, I guess that chicken and egg conundrum for the payroll is always going to be there, I think. So anyway, so look, Jim, we've talked a lot about like tech, right? I mean, we've hit on a bunch of things here, but like, and Julie, I want your perspective too. Like, do you think it's living up to the hype, Jim? I'm like, do you think it's really helping the practitioner move forward, or is there something missing? Is it unrealistic in what we're all talking about as analysts and as companies out there developing this forward-looking stuff? Like, what do you think about all of that?
From where I sit, I think the one thing that no matter how good the technology becomes, when I think of payroll, right, ultimately, I think the biggest piece of that is calculating those taxes and making sure that they're filed timely, and then, quarterly reporting, annual reporting. I think we're doing really good on the employee side, getting employees paid faster, getting them onboarded faster. I think that's all good. But because of that state agency, federal agency, like because we're always going to be limited by what technologies they're using, I think we can only go so far in the payroll world until federal agencies, state agencies, they start to catch up with the technology outside there.
That's
right?
a great point.
Yep. I think payroll's eventually it's going to hit a wall, right? You're going to be able to do so much, but then you're always going to be limited by how you can get taxes paid, how you can get updates to employer information, unemployment rates, all of the important stuff that you depend on these agencies to give. If it's not coming timely, if they're not keeping up with what the technology's, doing in the business world, I think it's just, we're going to go into a holding pattern.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. You're right. It's kind of like the weakest link, right? Like it's going to break down. You can only go as far as your weakest link, and if the link in the chain is where you're transmitting your data to outside the organization, that's going to be a problem, especially when compliance is tied at the other end. No, I agree. Yeah, I think it's exciting. My only thing is I don't think that organizations are adopting this stuff fast enough. And I'm sure there's a lot. Julie, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I'll kind of leave this to you. That's just my view of what I've seen from sort of talking to people and interviewing folks and doing surveys and doing work. There might be there's still some hesitation all around. I mean, there's people not even on cloud yet, let alone some of these other, more advanced things. But Julie, what do you think? People are sort of looking at this.
Yeah, I wouldn't deny that there still is some hesitation, or sometimes it's funding, right?
Yeah.
To be truthful, it's it's not the first funding priority as a back office function. But I will say, because I work more on the client side and work with the practitioners directly, there is an element that can be frustrating when you see the providers coming out with constant calc and just all the cool things that they're building into their product. And at the same time, a lot of the pains are taken away by virtue of how your different products come together behind the scenes. So individually, providers make a lot of noise, right, as they come up with some new and great innovation. But collectively, as it's deployed in an organization, especially larger organizations, what good does it do if your global payroll engine moves much smoother and faster if all of the underlying ICP engines, don't move any faster? You really, haven't majorly moved the needle on your close date, for example, for payroll. So there's an element of, I think, constant frustration in, these innovations are great, but we have to figure out how collectively the whole end-to-end processes get impacted, and we move the needle there. And that's just a challenge for every organization because they're putting different parts of the puzzle together differently.
True, right? And different use cases, different stages of their maturity and growth. So yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to take on. Um, so Jim, just to kind of wrap up, I know we could probably, we say this every episode, we could probably go on for hours, but everybody is buzzing about generative AI, large language models. I'm excited for large language models, especially for payroll. I think compliance is going to be a huge help with that, sifting through local laws and garnishment orders, and these sorts of things are going to be really helpful. But what's your thoughts? Are you using AI in your work? I mean, are you what is your point of view on that? And what would be your advice to practitioners maybe just starting to mess around and get it, not mess around, but embrace it in their environments?
Yeah, we actually we did a hackathon fairly recently where we
Oh,
started
nice.
to tap into AI and just look at what some of the capabilities were. Obviously, reading garnishment notices, reading tax notices, different ways to pull out the salient information, and then thinking using it to create knowledge base articles or even you mentioned that chatbot experience. So definitely playing with the tools that are available and looking at all that stuff. And honestly, I think my opinion is embrace it, right? Try to understand it. See how it fits into your world. I do think that any payroll specialist, would benefit from just giving it a try, right? Just there's the only harm you could do is just not understanding. Don't be afraid of it. Give it a try, and I think that that's the best way to get comfortable and understand, or even come up with new ideas or different ways that AI can support you.
Yeah, absolutely. Julie, what is your advice to buyers from that perspective around generative, how to look at this now?
Yeah, so of course, embracing these new technologies, they're definitely here to stay. The question is what they end up looking like. But I would say embrace, especially from a learning perspective and understanding and trying to view the possibilities and the efficiencies. But when it comes to deploying or standing up something, that's where I tend to see a lot more element of caution and risk, and you have to stay very close to data privacy, data security, anything, or the false impression that something that might get generated through AI channels or a large language modeling is taken as compliant advice. It's almost the same as if you would apply that to legal language or what your legal options are. And so we know that we're in one of those functional areas where there's just a lot of risk, and risk adversity reigns, and so that's where I see clients wanting to explore and yet being cautious, unless they could push all of that fiduciary stuff off on a provider, then they're kind of happier to go for it.
Yeah,
Yes,
let
yes.
let them deal with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, yes, especially in a world where errors, mistakes are not tolerable, right? It's payroll. So,
Yeah, and it's one of the things people like about outsourcing. If you want to get caught up and really caught up on technology, then you can take a provider who's doing that across multiple clients and shift a little bit of your risk, right?
yeah.
And has become a conversation.
Yep. Yep. I love it. I love it. Well, look, this has been amazing. Jim, thank you for being a friend of the show. Thank you for coming on. Where can folks find you, and can they access your art? Or I know we're going to share a few if you don't mind, but where can folks connect with you and maybe network if they'd like?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. You can reach me there. My art isn't published anywhere yet. I am working on a book. Hoping to have that out by the end of the summer. It's very reminiscent of Orbiting the Giant Hairball. I don't know if you've ever read that book by Gordon
No,
MacKenzie.
no,
Yeah,
no. Interesting.
wonderful book by Gordon MacKenzie. He worked at Hallmark, so he created this fun little corporate book where he has little blurbs about different ways to approach social situations at work, and
Interesting.
it's funny, but all throughout the book is his artwork, and I've never found another book like it, and I really want to create something very similar where there's going to be written segments, and then interspersed with a lot of my comic strips throughout. But please definitely share them, and I'll reach out to both of you when the book's ready to go, and maybe maybe get an endorsement or
yes.
Of course. That would be great fun.
Or a
Absolutely.
forward.
Absolutely. Well, that's so cool, man. I want to see it. I definitely want to copy. And I will be sharing your art. I'll share a few, make sure everybody has your links, but I'll also share a few pieces of art on our Twitter and LinkedIn accounts. But Julie, what about you? Where are you next and what's coming up?
Yeah, so for me, as you know, I do most of my work is client side. And so I've got some pretty heavy client transformation work. Summers when folks double down, and are trying to get ready as they get to go live, things they want to go live in the next year. So a lot of client work that is taking me to a number of different cities in case folks are listening and might want to try to catch up. I'll be in Boston next week. And included in that is an HR networking event at the Red Sox versus Yankees game at the Friday night. So I am doing some networking with some HR folks. So if anybody happens to be listening in a timely fashion, reach out to me if you're in that area and would want to be a part of that. I'm in Cincinnati the following week, toward the end of the week, in Houston at the end of the month, the week of the 26th. And then in Chicago with some clients and a provider in the week of July 10th. So
wow, U.S. tour. U.S. tour.
A lot of
busy
you
need to sell T-shirts.
No, I don't know about that, but you know what I love most about that is I always look for every chance I can get to meet new people, HR practitioners, HR leaders when I'm out and about. And so, I'm not always the best at reaching out to everyone I know in my networks, but I would be happy wherever I am. If I'm coming to a place near you, I'd be happy to sit down and find a way to have coffee or dinner or listen to your transformation journey.
I love it. Are you Red Sox or Yankees?
I don't know that I care.
Detroit, you don't care. You're Tigers, right? You're Tigers. Yeah. Good. Okay, we'll enjoy that. And I'm going to take a little bit of a rest, I think, during the summer in terms of travel and be working on content. But look for my latest blog right now available for you is the UKG Analyst Day. There's some good updates in there about what's going on in their HCM world. I'm working on one on their acquisition with Metis, so look for that. I'll also be on the Burning Platform podcast with Witty Merchandani. I was actually just on there recently, and we're going to be talking the news alongside Brenton Skinner from 360 Insights. And then on the 28th, look for me to host a panel that we ran at the Payroll Org on June 28th at 1 p.m. It's a Mythbuster style panel where we're going to be addressing some of the myths that stop firms from adopting earned wage access. So if there are any Payroll Org non-members, if you're not a member of Payroll Org and you want to be a part of that and you're on the buy side, come talk to me. Hit my DMs up and I will see about getting you a pass to that. So I want to make sure everybody gets to see that. It's a really fun time. We had a blast at Payroll Org, and we're running it back with a new group of executive leaders and practitioners. And then, of course, I just have a ton of content coming on the way. So just stay close to my channels. Some very interesting stuff coming out. I'll just leave it at that. So just stay tuned, and great to see you both, speak to you both. We didn't do video this time, but appreciate you coming on, Jim. And as always,
great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Okay.